Welcome, everyone. It's a new year, 2026, and it is time for the first edition of Wednesday with Walton and Reis of the new year. I'm Brian Walton. This is my partner, Kyle Reis. Kyle, welcome.
Thank you for having me again, Brian. How are you tonight, sir?
Very fine. Thank you. Very fine. We got a lot to cover here. We're obviously recording Tuesday night for Wednesday morning, but you'll find us each week starting about 6 a.m. if you get up that early at all your favorite podcast apps, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, you name them, they're all out there. And then also at thecardinalnation.com if you want to just pick it up at the website. So we've got a few things to cover. The main subject this week is not going to be rotations, minor league rotations, because we don't have time. And we're going to blame that on the Cardinal signing of Justin Bruihl, which we'll talk about first because it's the newest news. But we're going to spend the majority of the time today talking about our top prospect list, which as of Tuesday has been completely unveiled. And so all that's left now is the sweeping up articles where we cut and dice and talk about different votes and guys that have moved up and guys that moved down and some guys that didn't make the list that we still like anyway and that kind of stuff. And that'll carry us right up to winter warm-up, at which point in about 10 days from now, Kyle and I will be at Ballpark Village and the Busch Stadium, and we'll get lots of new news about what's happening with the guys rehabbing and getting ready for the new season. And at that point, it'll feel like 2026 is getting really close, right?
That's right. That's winter warm-up means the 2026 season's right around the corner. I think we're less than 60 days away from the World Baseball Classic, which means we're about 50-ish days away, less than 50 days away from spring training games, right? Not even like something, whatever it is. But yeah, so everything as we sit here on January 7th is very, very, very close to happening.
So I'm going to be the first one to take our podcast off the rails, and we're only like a
Yes.
minute and a half in. What's your take on World Baseball Classic? I'm kind of hey, I love that the countries get their chance to, show their stuff, but it's also disruptive. It takes guys away from camp, and for teams that aren't necessarily Dodgers quality, it sort of gets in the way of figuring out which guys you want to have on your team.
Brian, am I wrong? Didn't the Cardinals win spring training, the last World Baseball Classic? That's all I care about is the Cardinals winning spring training. That's all that
Okay,
matters.
okay. Woo-hoo.
No, I am a bit of a hate.
Shane Robinson, spring training batting champion. I'll never forget it as long as I live.
Yes, yes. Or as you talk about some of the articles we're going to be rolling out. As I pointed out, Team Israel legend Noah Menlinger, Cardinals prospect, who we're going to touch on in the coming days. It's I would say that I am in practice a World Baseball Classic hater. I hate the idea of interrupting the build up to the major league season. However, when the actual tournament gets going in earnest, I am full throttle, cutting time out of my schedule to watch it. Because like I think a lot about that. And this is like during the baseball season, during the off season, I think a lot about the play that Randy Arozarena made last World Baseball Classic, where he robbed a home run and he just stood there in front of the fence out in the outfield, didn't move, didn't do anything, just had this blank look on his face. And it's not all the pageant. It's like those are fun moments. It's this really fun thing. Now, I do know that some of the players have trouble winding up and then also winding down from it and then winding back up to the major league season, and that's a bummer. And I'd love to see them find some way of making it all work. But so that's where I'm at.
Yeah,
I'm a
I think about a guy like Ivan Herrera, and the Cardinals are trying to figure out, can Ivan Herrera catch it out? We know he can hit, and it just seems like, and he's going to want to play for his homeland, and I get it, I get it. Panama doesn't have much, so
yeah.
but on the other hand, he's a guy that those several weeks would be valuable in camp, and I guess we just have to, be happy to have it both ways.
Yeah, and from an it's an interesting perspective. I know that there's been a lot of talk about wanting JJ Weatherholt to have the chance to play for Team Korea, I believe. I'm going to end up screwing that up, and I'm sorry if I got it wrong, but I believe his mother is Korean, or I don't remember what it is, and I'm sorry if
As long as you're at least two generations within, you're good. So it might be a grandparent for all I know.
so yeah, something like that. But like I think about that, and this is kind of where the disruption of the World Baseball Classic is really where I have issue because it's probably best for him and his outlook for the Cardinals to stay at camp and not play in the World Baseball Classic. But then again, if
Clearly.
Tarek Skubal and all of these players are away at the World Baseball Classic, you could almost argue that sure, it might take him away from the importance of being in camp, but is he actually seeing better talent and actually getting more of a major league
Not
ramp up?
not not, not to belabor the point though. I mean, Tariq Skubbal's got a job no matter what.
Yeah,
JJ Weatherholt is fighting to get one. We don't even know what position he's going to play yet. But
yeah.
all right. Enough on the World Baseball Classic. We'll come back around to that in a couple months when it's topical. Let's talk about Justin Bruihl. Now, we've talked multiple times on this podcast, and everybody knows after JoJo Romero, the left side of the bullpen is pretty empty.
Yeah.
And just JoJo Romero, although it's been quiet lately, is probably one of the most available players that the Cardinals may have if they get the right kind of offer in return. I don't think Justin Bruihl is going to be the left-handed guy, but he could be one of the guys, right? He's got 94 career MLB, games. He's been around, but he's also been on the fringe of a lot of rosters and bumped off a lot of them, including Cleveland. And that's how the Cardinals got him.
Yeah, that's it, Brian. That's really been the interesting thing. It's just stockpiling some left-handed options, just to have some bullpen options, and then that stops you from having to rush some of your prospects into major league action. Not like they would do that anyways, but it's a good bridge. You got to bring on guys like that with major league experience. Some interesting release traits. He's kind of a crossfire lefty from a low three quarters angle, and I think that the little bit of major league experience in the past in the minors, he showed when he was with the Dodgers, and he's been around kind of like Jared Schuster, right? Like Jared Schuster, the other free agent that the Cardinals brought in. Or no, they traded for him too, right? Why am I blanking out on that, Brian? Another lefty that they brought in, the left-handed depth. They've been around. They have a little bit of experience.
Jared Schuster was a free agent signing.
Okay, that's God. I can't keep anything straight.
That's okay.
Anymore.
That's all right. That's all right. The Schuster family's not listening tonight. I guarantee you.
I wouldn't say that, Brian. I know we're big in the Schuster household,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
the Bruihl and the Schuster household are big
yeah.
fans of Wednesdays with Walton and Reis. But so it's just to say that like there's some interesting characteristics there. He does have some interesting movement on his pitches. I know that he made a little bit of a splash on Twitter in the past couple of weeks, showing that he's getting to more velocity inside of labs. Really what it boils down to when you watch him is if he can throw enough strikes and his sweeper needs more velocity. It's a low 80s offering, high 70s offering. If he can get to more velocity with that, throw it pretty frequently and limit some of his sinkers, then he'll continue to have pretty dominant success against lefties and struggle against righties. But with a little more velocity in the sweeper, he might get to more success. So
So
we'll
what?
see.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's it. So we'll just see where it goes from there. But it's nice to have a little extra depth.
So the time that Zach Kent got to spend on the 40-man roster is barely 30 days. Another guy claimed off waivers, and clearly what the Cardinals are doing here is they're using the back end of their roster to cycle guys through. Interestingly enough, Kent, the right-hander, also came from Cleveland, and because he was claimed off waivers as opposed to Bruihl, Kent was on the 40-man, but now he's been removed, and we'll have to see whether he's claimed again or whether he will just report to Memphis.
Yeah, I'm really hoping he gets through. Not to say that he's some elite arm talent, but he was at least an interesting arm. If things were reversed, if he was the lefty and Bruihl was a righty, more than likely it wouldn't be the move that the Cardinals made. That the Cardinals just know that they need that left-handed depth, and it's funny. Your first thought when you look at the 40-man would not be that he would be the guy. You'd think Nick Raquette, but what does Raquette have going for him, Brian? It's that he's left-handed, just like us. So that's really what helps.
But he has athletic talent, which at least I do not. I can't speak to you. I've never played with you on the diamond, but my days are long past.
Brian, my head is too weird shaped for any type of aerodynamic action. So
Yeah, we'll put a
I
cap
would
on
not.
you.
Yeah, I gotta wear like a cone head cap, and it'll
Oh, there
help
you go.
shaping out my misshapen head. But no, that's it. I hope I'm really hopeful because I think that there's an intriguing arm here, with Zach Kent, and so I'm hopeful that the Cardinals can pass him through. That he'll make it through waivers. He can find his way back into the organization in a AAA capacity, and at that point work his way back up to potentially being a major league option out of the pen, or maybe even a spot starter. But if he stays in the organization, and again, this is us teasing what we'll get back into next week, what we tease we'd be into this week, but that'll be a conversation again where we talk about the Memphis rotation and what that might look like, or the Memphis bullpen. And yeah, so stay tuned next week and we'll get to it, but there's just too much prospect stuff to get
Mañana,
into.
mañana, mañana.
That's right.
All right. So the big news at the Cardinal Nation last week is that Kyle and I unveiled our top 7 prospects, and then we also inserted the 2 most recent acquisitions from the Boston Red Sox in the Willson Contreras trade. So probably let's pick it up with Brandon Clark at number 6. A lot of folks are excited about Brandon Clark. You and I both saw him in the 7 to 8-ish range, but because our votes were so consistent, he actually ranked just ahead of Jimmy Crooks and Joshua Baez in our overall rankings. How high should expectations really be for Brandon Clark? Because he's got a limited amount of time on his repertoire, and he's had some bumps along the way.
Yeah, it's all about tempered expectations with him. Like, you ride that excitement, feel that excitement. That is an Brandon Clark is an exciting arm with nasty stuff. There's still some toying with his fastball that he needs to do, and as any raw pitcher in the organization, even with filthy stuff, there's still a lot of development that needs to happen. I would say ride the excitement, but don't let hype overbuild the anticipation for him. This is not like we'll get to Liam Doyle, of course. In the Liam Doyle write-up, I was quick to say this 21-year-old is still developing. Let's not put him into major leagues. Let's not and the Cardinals aren't going to do that, but there's been some national sentiment like on draft day with Liam Doyle. Put him in he's ready, major league ready.
Hey, Randy Carricker from St. Louis Media, who's a great guy, knowledgeable guy, threw out the idea. His prediction is that Liam Doyle is going to be in St. Louis in August. And
Yeah.
unless he's passing through on a plane somewhere, I can't see it, but it was an interesting perspective. But I think the Cardinals realize that, and all they got to do is look in right field if they forget what happens when you rush a guy before he's really ready. And it's not like the 2026 Cardinals are one player away from contending to win the division. They're not. So if Weatherholt's not ready in spring training, certainly Liam Doyle has got a lot of work to do before we know he's ready for the major leagues. They have no reason to want to push these guys.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was using Doyle. They're about the same age. Clark's a little older than Doyle, but just to say that, Brandon Clark is not as advanced as Doyle is. And I believe that Doyle he still needs to work heavily on two pitches in order to get to the major leagues and to be the pitcher he's capable of being. With Clark, he needs to clean up his mechanics a little bit and get to a little bit more movement on his high 90s fastball. But what he really brings that's fascinating is a sweeper and slider combo. And both pitches are potentially, 70 grade, above average plus offerings that he gets swing and miss from both lefties and righties on. From his sidearm, high 3/4, mid high 3/4, crossfire left-handed delivery, and to get up to 98 miles an hour with his fastball. And as we mentioned in the article, there was a blister issue that kicked up in the year that really kind of messed up his command. So he's just so interesting and so exciting, but still very few professional innings, affiliated innings on that arm, and there's still a lot of work to get done. And you just take in the stuff and admire it.
Yeah. And, it's interesting. I think that probably if Clark's ready to go in the spring, which he should be, he'll probably be in the Peoria rotation. The question, of course, is going to be how quick can he get to Springfield, and, what will he look like in Double-A?
Brian, we could spend, if we do the rotation thing, we're going to have to talk for 2 hours. It's going to be
All
a
right,
2 hour.
all right, all right. Fair enough. We'll park that one then. But I think that's probably where we're going to see with
Yes.
Brandon Clark. Let's jump around. Since you already teed up Liam Doyle, let's talk about Liam Doyle. I was pretty clear in my mind, given where they are in their careers, Weatherholt having a full year ahead and being on the cusp of the majors, I didn't feel like I could put Doyle ahead of Weatherholt. But you struggled with that decision, didn't you, before you ranked him 1 and 2?
Yeah, well, again, not to talk about somebody else. Sometimes I do this, but like with our top three prospects, Rainiel Rodriguez, Liam Doyle, and JJ Weatherholt, I think there's an argument to be made for each one as the best prospect in the organization. Now, the problem is Rainiel's still far away, and Doyle has two things working against him. One is that he's a pitcher, and we all know how volatile that is in the first place, even if you're going just on talent. And the second thing that works against him, aside from being close to the majors, is that there is still development to be had. During the 2025 collegiate season at Tennessee, some of the things he was doing earlier in the year that people were knocking him for, like losing velocity late in starts, that ended up being blister related as well. So a lot of those concerns that people had about Liam Doyle early in the collegiate season, he actually put to bed by the time he got drafted. That was part of why the Cardinals, who probably, and again, I don't know this for a fact, but the Cardinals, who probably did not give him a top 15 grade early on, might not even have given him a first round grade. Some teams weren't giving Doyle a first round grade. Part of the reason why the Cardinals and other teams would feel comfortable drafting him in the top 5 or top 7 or top 10 is because, all of a sudden, the last 10 starts of his season, he's throwing harder in the 6th inning than he was in the first, and in the high 90s. And his stuff is biting just as hard and with just as much velocity across the spectrum. of his arsenal. So that is encouraging, and that's why he's awesome. But the issue is he still has work to do with his slider, and he still has work to do with a fourth offering to go with what I believe to be an above average flashing plus split changeup and his obvious plus fastball. So the best way of summing it up with Liam Doyle is Liam Doyle throws a slider in the heart of the plate to one of the best catching prospects in baseball for the Cincinnati Reds, and he hits it 3,000 feet over the wall in Palm Beach. And that's not a good sign. You know, he got behind in the count, threw a slider in the heart of the plate, and raw power is going to win that battle 100 times. So he still has work to do. He's not as polished, and until he gets there, that's what would stop him from being the number one prospect in the Cardinals organization in my mind, Brian.
I think I found an interesting tidbit. Randy Flores was asked about Doyle. And of course, Randy Flores, being the scouting director, was the guy who ultimately made the decision to draft him fifth overall for the Cardinals. And Flores talked about Doyle's intensity. That's one of his trademarks on the mound, that he's extremely intense, extremely competitive. And Flores said, it's better to have that in a guy and try to dial it back maybe now and then than it is to try to create it, because then it's not real. But he said, hey, it'll be interesting to see whether he can maintain that over a long professional season, making 25 or 30 starts. And that will be, I think, a very interesting thing to see with Liam Doyle, because it's not always going to go his way every day.
Brian, we love psychopaths on Wednesday with Walton. And that's what he is. Look, as I mentioned on Twitter, I went off the rails with my Doyle write up pretty much from the beginning. And it's because I love his intensity. I think that one of the keys, one of the beauties of what he does is how intense he is. I think about Gordon Graceffo a lot in context with Liam Doyle, because I remember my first exposure to Gordon Graceffo, watching him at Villanova, was he was fired up on the mound. And then when he made it into the Cardinals organization at Peoria, he was fired up, and in Springfield he was fired up. And then in Memphis, he was fired up, but then he that part of his game kind of went away when he started getting hit around a little bit. I guess he lost some confidence, and he didn't want to show or project confidence on the mound that wasn't earned. Total guess. But so I think it benefits him well to be as fired up, as emotional as he can be, as long as it's that type of emotional. It's not the whiny, bad strike zone, getting upset kind of emotional. And that's what I like about Liam Doyle is it's an intense competitor emotion. It's not, I'm not getting the strike calls that I want, or that was it's not that, and that's the kind of intensity that I like and I want, and that honestly gets me fired up. The fan in me gets fired up to watch.
So as long as we're talking about the pitchers in our top rankings, the forgotten man, Quinn Matthews, of course, he's not forgotten, but he's ranked number 4 in the system, so midway between Doyle and Clark. And Matthews had, based on a Quinn Matthews measure of a season, he had a disappointing year. But compared to an average or above average pitcher, Quinn Matthews had a pretty good 2025, despite, having some ups and downs. How close is Quinn Matthews to being able to compete? Nobody's bringing him up as a guy who's going to come to camp and compete for one of the opening berths in the rotation. Does that mean that there's another 6 months, a half a season in AAA for him, or what?
Brian, I would think that that's the case, right? That he'll have to prove that. Like, the two major concerns with him is we saw his velocity dip and his command kind of, go to the wayside. For a command first pitcher drafted out of college that added velocity and turned himself into a top 50, top 100 prospect in baseball, to have both the velocity and the command go away in 2025, it was a really big concern. But, I think that towards at the back half of the Memphis season, when he got healthy and he was getting to more velocity and his command wasn't as bad, I think that we started to see him start to piece it back together to some of the promise that we saw in 2024. But really, to add to the point that you're making about Quinn Matthews, Brian, it's fascinating to think that if that would have been Bryson Mounts, right, or Pete Hansen or Eshawn Henderson, who, next year we say, oh, yeah, a 25% strikeout rating at AAA in 2026, while uh, posting a sub 4 ERA and a sub 4.5 FIP, you'd be like, all right, yeah, this is the back of
Go, go.
this is the back of the rotation potential bullpen option that we need these guys to be. And with Matthews, because of what he flashed prior, it was disappointing. So really, Brian, I wouldn't be surprised if Quinn Matthews goes to camp and puts himself in a position to be the sixth starter, depending on what happens in the St. Louis rotation, and the two guys that are kind of whoever the two guys end up being in the St. Louis rotation that end up being bullpen or depth options, and then around. But I do think Quinn Matthews has it in him to be the next man up if things get weird and everybody stays healthy. So it's just a matter of if he can get that command that he's always had back in with the baseball that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, the Major League Baseball and the difference there. If he can get that honed back in, and if the little shoulder fatigue that he dealt with specifically in 2025 is just a blip on the radar and not something that extrapolates over the rest of his career or even just 2026.
So again, Doyle 2, Matthews 4, Clark 6. And then, of course, we have 3 hitters in the top 6, the 2 catchers, Rainiel Rodriguez and Leonardo Bernal. And then number 1, J.J. Weatherholt. Rainiel Rodriguez, you said you considered him in the top 3, and he had a tremendous season across 3 levels, really across 2 levels. He just finished briefly at Peoria. I talked to his hitting coach in Peoria, and it couldn't have been a more glowing recommendation of what this young man can be. I thought I figured out something that his height was listed when he was signed at 5'10", and his weight 197. And after being around him, I was pretty sure that wasn't the case, but I found some pictures that proved it to my mind. And I didn't notice, but in the Cardinals media guide for the year, they had Rodriguez at 5'8", 209. And I decided, okay, I've discovered this great thing. Well, I talked to a scout friend about it. It happened to be during the playoffs. And he said, why don't you look at the screen right now and tell me how Alejandro Kirk is doing in the playoffs? And of course, Toronto's backstop, who's 5'8", and he was, played very, very well in the postseason. So that was the end of that discussion.
And he's pudgy, not Rainiel, but Alejandro, Brian, and not to bring it up every episode, but to bring it up every episode, we champion the pudgies. And so, God bless our people, Brian. God bless my people. But yeah.
I mean, Baseball America already called Rodriguez the best power hitter in the system. Now, granted, last year they called J.J. Weatherholt the best power hitter in the system, and Weatherholt, in all the things that Weatherholt does well, hitting for power is probably about the bottom of the list. So I wasn't so sure about that selection. The bottom of the list that's right up there, but still,
exactly.
Rainiel Rodriguez, the best power hitter in the Cardinal system at 5'8".
Yeah, it's for me, when I watch him, it's all about the mechanics of his swing. And I think that that's maybe one of the things that gets lost. Everybody will talk about his swing path and the directness to the ball that he has. He's in the zone long with his bat, but he's direct through. And it's got some of that launch angle loop to it. And what he does really well is he has pull power, which is the big thing now. It's always been, let me rephrase that. It's not the big thing now, but emphasizing it and highlighting it. The pull power, as opposed to just all field power, has become the most sustainable version of power, and that's why it's kind of getting championed more now than ever. And that's something that Rainiel Rodriguez does, but it's in his stance. A lot of guys who have a big leg kick or a leg kick at the plate, not only is it about timing with the pitcher, but it allows you start to generate a little bit more power, right? A little bit more energy, a little bit more power with a bigger leg kick. And when you set it down, there's that power that flows from the moment of contact, the foot contacting the ground, through your body and out of your swing. With Rainiel, it's not that. And this is what a lot of really great power hitters do that I think sometimes I forget. And with Rainiel, he's back on the baseball in his stance, and his leg, his foot, the timing mechanism is specifically just for timing. Now, it's also generating power, of course. That's what all of the lower body does. But he doesn't need that to get to his power. And he has a very tight center of balance in his swing that keeps him on balanced throughout his entire swing. It allows his hands to stay back and get on breaking pitches that he might otherwise be beat on, even low and outside. I do think he'll struggle with changeups because everybody struggles with elite changeups until you get there. But I think that he will make, he'll cut his teeth, is that power is going to stay. It just is going to stay. And it's not going to go away. It's just whatever else happens around it. And we can be encouraged by that because the data at the lowest levels of the minor leagues, which doesn't really mean anything, especially in the second half, of the minor league season because the talent gets weirder and weirder every year in the second half as guys have been promoted and funneled out, and experience levels get lesser and lesser. But the data tells us that the swing decisions are smart and will carry the power if he continues on this track of swing decisions and contact in the zone.
And he passed Leonardo Bernal, who at 21 years old, switch hitter, had a solid season at Springfield, didn't knock it out of the park, but still had a very, very solid above average season and is very well positioned for the future. There's this log jam of catching that they're going to have to work out, especially if Jimmy Crooks, doesn't make the major league roster for whatever reason. Then you're going to have Leonardo Bernal ready for Memphis, but Jimmy Crooks there potentially as well.
Yeah, that's it. Man, I really like Leonardo Bernal. I say it in my write-up. I don't think he's going to be the best catcher but he's my favorite catcher in the organization. I like his build. I like his stockiness. I like the way he goes about it. I like the words you hear about Leo Bernal from his coaches who talk about the work that he's put in to win the Gold Glove at the minor leagues. And again, just go on, Brian.
Let me interrupt because I witnessed, and I said this a year ago, but folks may not remember it. I watched last spring every day. Leonardo Bernal and Rainiel Rodriguez were together. Leo was the veteran. Rodriguez is a guy who's just arrived in the States for the first time, and they stuck together like glue. And it was really impressive, the leadership that Bernal showed. And obviously Rodriguez had a great year as well. And I'm sure it's not all because of Bernal, but it was a veteran adult kind of thing to do for a 21-year-old who, most cases is trying to figure out where he fits in the world.
Yeah, that maturation, that is the word that comes up with him. And I wish I would have done a better job of highlighting that. I think Bernal and Jimmy Crooks are a fun contrast because they are both leaders. They're both leaders. They just go about it a different way. Like, it's not a Paul Goldschmidt, Nolan Arenado situation with the leadership, right? Where Goldie is kind of a quiet leader and Arenado's a quiet leader. It's not like that. Bernal is a quiet leader by example, but it's about getting input to become as good as he can be, and about leading from example, and about leading through communication. Jimmy Crooks is a ball of energy that you're excited to be around and learn from and get excited about pitching to.
And he's a charismatic guy. He's kind of one of those guys that people gravitate to. And it's hard to describe till you see it.
That's it. And they're both charismatic in their own way, and it's not like a shut off version of charisma. It's an open version of charisma that branches off in two different directions, and that's what I love about Leo Bernal. Again, I feel like I have to keep bringing up that he won the minor league Gold Glove, which doesn't really tell us anything other than that he's going to be able to stick at catcher. It doesn't mean I don't know what level he's going to be as a catcher. There's people who complain about his blocking, but I don't think his blocking is as bad. I think they're projecting some of the stockiness in his motions and thinking that it won't project out at the major league level. He's fine in that regard. He's gotten to be a good blocker or a good framer. He has a plus arm. He's getting quicker and quicker in his pop time, and he's getting more and more involved in the theory of catching our entire arsenals. And like you can't beat that. You can't ask for anything more. So that I love Leonardo Bernal and the way he goes about it and how committed he is. I think some of these guys, and reasonably so, when you're a teenager or in your early 20s, you're thinking about the majors. And sure, you might be thinking about only getting guys out at Double-A or hitting in Double-A, or you're definitely focused on what you're doing. And I think you're also always thinking about the major leagues or the next level or wanting to be a major leaguer or comparing yourself to your contemporaries. And I don't think that's the case with Leo Bernal. I think he's solely focused on becoming as good as he can be in that silo while making everybody else around him as good as can be with his aid. And I think that that's rare. And I think that that's a great characteristic to have.
All right. This episode was brought to you by the Leonardo Bernal Fan Club, Kyle Reis, president.
Yeah.
Now, this is really weird. We've been talking for 30 minutes. We haven't, and we're covering the top prospect system. We talked about Weatherholt in the context of the World Baseball Classic, but we didn't talk about Weatherholt in the context of being the number one prospect in the Cardinals system. What do you want to say about JJ that folks don't know already, or that is important for folks to keep in mind when they see him in Major League camp with this sky-high expectation that he's going to be the savior of the team?
Brian, I have one glass of a $4 bottle of red wine from Walmart, and here I am rambling on worse than I normally do. No, so with JJ Weatherholt, and I think that that first line of my write up really sums it up. He is both extremely boring and extremely exciting all in one. And it's just because he doesn't, the excitement comes from how polished he is and how good he is and above average he is across the board. Like, there's nothing that stops him from being above average across the board. He's an above average athlete. He's an above average runner. He has an average to above arm. He gets squared up to the baseball as well as anybody. You know, when you look at his hitting profile, he has average to above opposite. Well, he has above average opposite field power, and he has average power from gap to gap. And he has the ability within his swing, within his approach, to get to power, to pull power. And which does nothing for the fact that he makes well above average swing decisions, does tremendous contact with what he does in the zone, and he's so polished without having what might be considered modern flair. And I just, because of these things, I both underrate him and overrate him, and tend to like put him underneath the microscope more than I put other prospects underneath the microscope because of it. Because I'm trying to figure out how somebody who has not played professionally can be so polished and professional. And it's because, like, I think about Brendan Donovan. It took Brendan Donovan, who was, you know, when he became a rookie in 2023, at the end of the 2022 season, I remember thinking back on that, Brian, and being like, all right, this is probably the most polished player that I've seen not make a major league debut. Mm. And it took him 4 seasons, including a COVID break, to get to that. You know, it took JJ Weatherholt months. I mean, it took him months to get there. So that's, you know, again, it's not an exciting, he's not going to steal 30 bases. He's not going to hit 30 home runs. You know, he'll probably he'll probably hit, maybe he might get to 40 doubles in the heart of his career. But he does everything so well, and none of it's particularly loud, but it's polished and professional.
And, you know, when he was named the organizational player of the year, the Cardinals had a Zoom session so we could ask questions to he and the last person, one of the last people we're going to talk about today, Bryson Mott's pitcher of the year in the system. And Weatherholt said, "Hey, I'm, you know, focused on being the best defensive player I can be right now." He said, "That's the Cardinals have asked me to be a complete infielder. That means third base, second base." And that's, you know, the thing that he said he was going to be working on most this year, along with, of course, making the club, because last year it was kind of unusual. The guy, you know, first year after being drafted to be invited to big league camp, but JJ Weatherholt isn't, you know, your average guy as well. Where do you think Weatherholt's going to play for the Cardinals defensively?
Do I have to answer?
No.
Brian, I think it's going to be second base. I think that's a path of least resistance. I think that there's a better chance. You know, I feel like he's going to be able to have success wherever he plays.
Yeah.
More than likely, Nolan Gorman stays a member of the St. Louis Cardinals. More than likely, Brendan Donovan gets traded from the Cardinals. And I think it makes more sense to have Nolan Gorman play third base than it does to have him play second. So I would suggest that if he breaks camp, if Brendan Donovan's been traded, he breaks camp with the Cardinals, it'll be at second base. And you know, with that, that means even if the Cardinals can't trade Nolan Arenado, and I don't care what rhetoric they put out, I don't think he comes to camp with the. I don't think he.
No, probably not. So your point is a valid one, and that is Weatherholt's going to play where the Cardinals need him most, and that's going to depend on the other roster decisions they make.
Yeah.
Since we talked about the other of the year for the Cardinals, you didn't get a chance last week to talk about Bryson Mott's, and I don't know if you're going to get into spin race and induced vertical break and all that with Bryson Mott's, but I know there have been some questions about your write-ups as to why you haven't necessarily quoted all those numbers for these guys, which I know you have in your head, but folks like me might have trouble putting them always into context.
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of give a quick scouting report on Bryson Mounts before we get into all that is, you know, I think the thing that I'm most interested in is the gains that he made between 2024 and 25. You know, he got some more velocity and more movement on a fastball, a slider, and a changeup. His changeup became a weapon. His slider became a weapon. You know, it was really interesting. He worked hard on a cutter, and the cutter looked really good at the start of the year. And then it kind of like ruined the shape of the rest of his arsenal. And he was getting hit around pretty hard in June. And from there, he scrapped the cutter, basically went fastball, slider, changeup through the rest of the season, and was dominant. I mean, dominant at Double A. And That's part of why, Brian, I'm kind of reluctant to include pitch data or statistics when I get into my write-ups. I like the idea of telling the story of the prospect. I think that that's more interesting because, if you want the data, you can Google search it. It's everywhere. Now, you're not going to get the high A or the double A data. And honestly, the data that I get from high A and double A, I am told not to share. The other thing that comes with that data is the data that's available to us in the Florida State League and in the International League, with Memphis and with Palm Beach, is through Baseball Savant, and that data we're becoming to find out through organizations is not as accurate as the data that organizations have.
You
So
provided some examples where pitches are mislabeled, and obviously
exactly,
that's a pretty basic problem.
yeah, even on prospects like Nolan Sparks, who is a 13th round pick out of a JUCO, you know, you look at Baseball Savant, and he throws 35 pitches. Well, really, it's just having trouble labeling the separating. Like it'll separate the sinker from a fastball. He's just throwing a fastball, and the cutter slider. It'll be no, he's just throwing a slider, and that sweeper is actually a curveball. And also the data's wrong. So that plays into it too. And then the other thing for me is an accessibility thing, and I think it's important. For me, I am both old school and new school when it comes to stats. The data is important. And if you say it's not, you're wrong. It just is important.
Baseball is a stats-driven game, no doubt about it. There's no way around it.
Exactly, exactly. But when I'm reading numbers like that, 18 inches of induced vertical break, let's talk about Blake Aida's sweeper. It has 18 inches of induced vertical break. Sometimes it can get to 19, and that is huge. That just means that it has a ton of depth. Now, to me, your average person, they're not going to know what 20 inches of induced vertical break is, not without showing a video of what it is. And also, the video you're going to see is going to be from an angle that isn't the same as the angle of the other video that you're going to see. So you're not going to be able to like compare one and one.
Is that
And
going to help him
also,
be a better major leaguer? That's what I want to
that's
know.
that's it. Yeah, exactly. Let me tell you, if I say it's got late depth and breaks arm side within that depth, that's more descriptive than 18 inches of vertical break. And also, you're not going to remember 18 inches of vertical break. You're going to remember that it's deep, and you're going to see it, and you're like, oh, that's filthy. So
Kyle, this subject is deep.
that we're Brian, we're deep thinkers. We're the modern day philosophers, you and I, with our $4 bottle of wine and our your poor secondhand having to deal with this. But
There you go. There you go.
so that's it. Like I just think that sometimes we get bogged down in the data. I think that the data isn't necessarily accurate for public consumption. And I think that as we're learning more and more, the pitch data in particular, and I think pitching data and hitting data is a little different here, but especially in minor leagues when you're talking about data, the delta of talent at the minor league levels is weird and it's not evenly dispersed like it used to be. And there aren't older minor leaguers exactly to help fill in the gaps of dispersion of talent. And then we have a major league and minor league baseball thing to sort out. And, also what's going on at the major leagues is just so far away from what we're seeing in the minors.
Yeah, you
And
made that point. I don't remember which prospect you made it on, but you talked about, and it's something that really, I mean, it's obvious, but it was something that I hadn't really thought about, and that is the gap, the pressure to bring players to the majors, the fewer levels of the minor leagues means that those gaps are bigger than they ever were before.
yeah, absolutely. That's why the second half of the season is kind of it's the Wild West as far as trying to evaluate talent against talent because you're dealing with a lot of fatigue, but also like the cream is already rose, and everybody's trying to get their players to AAA into the majors to see if they can make an impact on this wild card race that's expanded the playoffs. Everybody's going to their resources to try to better their team, even at the major league level. So it's changed the dispersion of talent heavily. So the other thing is that like especially with pitch design, like we'll talk about a sweeper and of a minor leaguer or a slider of a minor leaguer, and by the time he gets to the majors, even we're talking about AAA data of a guy who's thrown 30 starts. By the time it could be a sweeper, 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 he gets to the major leagues, that pitch might actually end up being a slider. So it's confusing. The break will change. That's everything is so in flux that I think it does a disservice to what's going on to be so specific in a data set that it alienates part of the fan base and also has the potential of being incredibly inaccurate within the reading, the viewership and the reading, the reader's ability to process and apply.
All right. Thank you for that. And the guys that Kyle mentioned most recently, Blake Motz is our number 18 prospect. Blake Ieda came in at 24A. And what happened was, of course, the Contreras trade happened after we finalized our top 50, after we were rolling down our countdown. So we basically did our individual votes and inserted these guys. Ieda's around the 25, between 24 and 25. And then Joyker Fajardo came in 20A, so just after 20. And Fajardo is a guy that a lot of folks are saying is a top 10 prospect. So why didn't you put him there? I know why I didn't, but I'm curious about you.
Yeah, there's a couple of reasons. The first one being that, again, he throws a fastball and a sinker, and neither of them have particularly good movement profile. You know, he had better results with more velocity, 94, 96, but specifically down the stretch, we saw him living like 92, 94 in the 2025 season, and it was getting beat around. It wasn't fooling anybody. Neither of those pitches were fooling anybody. And, you know, the other two things are he still throws too many pitches in the heart of the plate that won't bear out as he continue. Like he won't have the success he's having as he continues up the ladder with that. And you know, one of the things when you watch him is he's kind of a whiny competitor, and I don't know how else to put it. And I hate.
Yeah, you touched on that earlier in the context of Clark as a guy who doesn't do this, but you saw that in fact he's an umpire baiter. Huh?
Yeah, it's frustrating. You know, like he was getting call after call after call. It would have been the second or third start in high A for Salem, I believe. Or no, it would have been low A. Low A Salem for the Red Sox. And it would have been the second or third start, and he was getting all the calls. And then in the third inning, I believe, he started throwing sliders on the outside corner to righties, and on two straight pitches, he did not get the call, and he's just shaking his head and shrugging his shoulders and kind of not like throwing his hands up in the air in a very dramatic way, but kind of just like, you know, and I thought, oh, okay, I'm going to keep an eye on that. And it bore out throughout all of his starts. And it got really bad. It's funny. There's a start, maybe his fourth to last start or fifth to last start. He walked three, and his command was bad from the beginning of the game. And he whined the whole game about the zone. The whole game he was whining about it. And in a couple different times, the catchers had to come out and corral him. And I thought, that's not good. That's not good. So there's and again,
Well, we
he's
got
only
some
19.
maturity, but we're talking about a young man who's what, 19, right?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
has some growing up to do. Now, I'll tell you, when I looked at it, I looked at it very simply because we were in fact inserting them into our list. I said, do I think that Fajardo at this point is a better prospect than Bryson Motts? Do I think he's a better prospect than Chenwei Lin? And I said no. But I said, all right, Kate Crossland. We don't know Kate Crossland yet. Nate Dome is maybe. I'll put him ahead of Crossland and Dome. So that's how I slotted him into my list, just based on that.
I like that a lot, Brian. I mean, honestly, what a smart way to go about it. And I love where your head's at, and I think I would agree with you on your assumption as well.
Yeah, we were pretty close in our rankings for both these guys. We were within 3 spots on one of them and 2 spots on the other. So the prospects we talked about tonight, Weatherholt's write-up is free, so you can read Kyle's scouting report. Same with Bernal at number 5. The other guys are for subscribers. We hope you consider joining the Cardinal Nation. You're going to get to read everything that Kyle's written already, and there's a lot more to come as well. So with that, I think we will probably close our edition for January 7th of Wednesday with Walton and Reis. And we promise you next week, unless there's lots of news, we will get to the discussion of how we think the minor league rotations are going to shake out. Any closing comments, Kyle?
It's Justin Bruihl's fault, Brian. We agreed on that before, and I want everybody to know that the reason we didn't get into pitching depth is because the Cardinals signed Justin Bruihl or traded for Justin Bruihl, so blame him.
There you go. It's all Justin Bruihl's fault. Thanks, everybody, for watching and listening, and we will talk to you again on the 14th. Bye for now.